So the rules for division are the same as multiplication as far as what world you're in. So if I had 4 divided by -2, what I'm looking at is that I have 4 things in the positive world, so that comes from there, and I'm dividing it into 2 groups. So 4 divided by 2, you know, is 2. So I know that's going to be 2. But then we have this guy popping up. And so what it's saying is, you know, you had 4 positive things divided in 2 groups, but then you want the opposite of that. So since you were in the positive world, it's going to flip you over to the negative world, so your answer is going to be negative. If I had -4 divided by -2, or, you know, we can look at a lot of times in algebra, we don't use a divide sign like that. We do fraction because fraction is really division. So if I had -4 divided by -2, I have 4 negatives, so I'm in the negative world. I divide it in 2 groups, so that gives me it gives me a 2. But then I do the opposite of that. So I'm in the negative world, I do the opposite of that, and so I get a positive 2. You need to be able to work with fractions on this. So if I had, let's say 2 1/3 divided by 3, remember a fraction is just division. Because I'm working with fractions, I like to turn everything into a fraction. So if I have a whole number like this 3 on the bottom, I'm going to make that 3 over 1. So now I have 3 over 1. I'm going to take this mixed number and I'm going to turn it improper. So that'd be 7 over 3. If you don't remember how to do that, we multiply 3 times 2 and we add 1. And then this is division. So a lot of times with fractions, it's nice to divide horizontally. So a lot of times we write it this way. 7/3 divided by 3 over 1. And then we remember that rule that when I have a fraction divided by another fraction, I multiply by the reciprocal. And now that I'm multiplying, I love multiplying fractions because it's just across the top. 7 times 1 is 7. And across the bottom, 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so you multiply by the reciprocal when you're doing fractions. But we're in algebra, and so it gets a little bit more complicated. For example, I have 32x minus 8 all divided by 4. Do you remember the distribution property where if I had a number in front, I would distribute it? The same idea is going on here. This fraction bar right here, okay, this fraction bar right here is saying all of this is being divided by 4. So we have to kind of like do, hey, that's being divided by 4 and that's being divided by 4. So what I like to do is say that's 32x divided by 4 minus 8 divided by 4. Look at them separately. And then do the math of division, and you get your answer. So be very careful that what you're not doing is going like this, because a lot of people do this. They like cross that off, and then 4 goes into 32 8 times, so this would be 8x minus 8. That is not okay because of the fraction bar. You're saying it's all getting divided by 8, including that 8, or divided by 4, including that 8 over there. If you can't divide everything, that's okay. You just write that. Sometimes we think things have to come out so pretty for us to be able to do the math, and no, you can do it without it coming out pretty. So when we look at this, we're saying that all of the 5 minus 16y is being divided by 4, all of it. Now, that's easy to see that 16 and 4 can be divided because 16 can be divided by 4. But a lot of times we don't do the 5 because we think, hey, 5 can't be divided by 4 and get this pretty number. But it can because you just write 5 divided by 4, then there's a minus, 16y divided by 4. So go ahead and write them both. 5 over 4 is not a bad number. Fractions are not bad. Fractions are very, very good. We use fractions all the time in our lives. And so 5/4 is a perfectly fine answer. And then 16 can be divided by 4, so we get 4y. And that would be our answer there. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is something called domain. And domain is just saying what x values work. Okay, so write that in your notes. Domain, x values that work. Okay, normally all x values work. So if I had 2x plus 5, I could plug in any x value there. I could plug in 2, I could plug in -2, I could plug in a fraction, I could plug in anything, and we're totally good. We can multiply by it and add 5, and that's fine. So domain becomes more interesting when you have something like 2 over 1 minus x. Okay, because I have this fraction, I all of a sudden have a rule that comes in. And that rule is I cannot divide by 0. It is a bad thing to divide by 0. And because there's an x in the bottom, it's possible to get 0 there. In fact, if you think about it, if I were to plug in a 1 there, then that means I would have 1 minus 1, which equals 0. That means 1 cannot be a part of my domain. Remember, domain are all the x values that work. So 1 does not work because when I plug in 1, it makes the bottom equal to 0. So for this one, I'm going to say that my domain is all x values, but x equals 1. So I'm just saying everything but the 1 that makes the bottom equal to 0, because that is a rule. You cannot divide by 0. And whenever you have a fraction, you want to worry about that. Is the bottom equal to 0? Be very careful about that.